Okay, fine.
Gautam, please give access to Siddharth. Siddharth, okay, now you can share your screen. Okay, our team
Okay,
member
okay.
Gautam is going to access to you. Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Now we have a host. You can share your screen and start the session. Yeah.
Okay. So let me start the session. So let us understand about, so this session is a demo to understand about the Lightning Web Components. So during this session, I would like to give some light on what are the topics which are going to cover in the Lightning Web Components training. And also I'll try to give some basic idea about the Lightning Web Components, which is a new framework introduced by Salesforce. So, Lightning Web Components, as we know, is an advanced version which Salesforce has brought, and their idea is to replace the Lightning Aura components which is currently existing. So, Lightning Aura components is not that fast as compared to Lightning Web Components, and that's why LWC was introduced. So there are many benefits associated with Lightning Web Components. First is that the JavaScript has standardized a lot from what it was earlier to what is it now. So in order to adapt to the standard JavaScript, a framework was needed, and so for that purpose, LWC was introduced because it uses a standard JavaScript. Second thing is that since it uses pure JavaScript, so browser can easily interpret, and hence the processing of LWC components is faster as compared to what happens in Aura components. And third is that there is also a business side of it, and a strategic side where Salesforce believes that finding developers who already know JavaScript would be easier, and hence they can easily adapt themselves to LWC rather than finding people who are specific to Lightning Aura components. So these are important aspects of LWC. So first of all, we'll understand, so during the course structure, we'll understand the difference between Lightning Web Components and Lightning Aura components. So LWC is a feature which for which tooling support has been provided by Salesforce, and Salesforce recommends to use VS Code. So we have Salesforce SFDX, which are the CLI commands for which we, with the help of which we can do all the operations with respect to Salesforce. For example, deployment, creation of classes, and all those things. So in that terms only, tooling support for LWC has also been provided. We can use Visual Studio Code to create classes. We can create Lightning Web Components. We can deploy the changes to Salesforce environment. So this is a tooling support for LWC. We will have multiple demos of the Lightning Web Component where I'll demo all the things related to all the means all the topics which are part of LWC. Will also do have a demo with respect to them. So how are they used in the actual real world? We will definitely do a compare and contrast of the Lightning Web Components and Aura components. We'll explore LWC properties and Lightning Data Services. So Lightning Data Services, as we know, was earlier existing with the Aura components as well. And this time also, the Lightning Data Service is available with Lightning Web Components. So we'll explore those things as well. Now, this slide talks about why web components. So the thing is that they are reusable. So when I say reusable, it means that if we have created one web component, we can use it in other web components as well. We can import the functionality, export the functionality, and the templates allow us to reuse the components. Then it has helps in composition. It also uses encapsulation where the shadow DOM concept is being used. And fourth one is the very important one, is standardization, where we are using W3 specs, which is supported by majority of the browsers. So as we know that JavaScript has, as I was talking earlier also, JavaScript has got standardized. And so all those new features which has come as part of JavaScript are being supported by majority of browsers. So that is something which LWC supports. So that's why it's very beneficial. Now there is this slide talks about the existing approach where we deal with UI components, JavaScript and CSS libraries and DOM. But here we have just UI components and document object model. Then what are the core elements of web components? This slide talks about those are HTML templates, custom elements, shadow DOM, and the ECMAScript modules. So yes, ECMAScript is the latest one which we are using is ECMAScript 6, and Lightning Web Component uses this modules of JavaScript. So that is a very important feature of LWC. This this slide talks about the Lightning Web Components basics, where it says that it is helpful in enhancing the productivity, because we are using ES6 plus, we are using custom elements, modules, and templates. So ES6, as I told, that it is the latest version of JavaScript, ECMAScript 6. So all those features which have introduced in JavaScript can be used in Lightning Web Components. So that is really good about this. Now, second thing is that it has been built for performance. So what it means to say is that more code can be executed by the browser instead of JavaScript abstraction. So what happens in Lightning Aura components is that it's not a pure JavaScript code. What happens is that when we write any code on Lightning Aura components, those code is being converted by browser to understand, and then execution takes place. So that causes latency and decreases the speed. Whereas in case of Lightning Web Components, the code is executed by the browser itself, because we are using a standard JavaScript here. And the third thing is that it's compatible and easy to run. So we can use Lightning Web Components anywhere, and they are quite easy to use. One more important feature of LWC is that it is open source. So when I say open source, it means that there can be any server at backend, and we can use Lightning Web Components just for the UI purposes also. So for example, LWC components can be used on Salesforce, but other than that, it can be used across multiple systems. For example, we can use it with Java, we can use it with Node.js. They can be anything at backend, and we can use it because of the fact that Lightning Web Components are open source. So this is also a very important feature of Lightning Web Components. That is, it allows developers to contribute to this Lightning Web Component open source system. So this is a unique feature with LWC. Other all the technologies which we have, that is Visual Force Pages, Lightning Aura components, they are not open source. They can only be used in Salesforce, but Lightning Web Components are open source, so they can be used anywhere. So I can have Java as my backend language, or even Node.js, or any other language which you can think of. We can deploy our code to Heroku, and we can have apps and website running on LWC with other servers as well. So it's not necessary that it has to be only Salesforce. So there is a JavaScript library called JSForce, with the help of which we can connect our Node.js applications to Salesforce. So those things are also there, and we will be covering those aspects as well. How to create Lightning Web Components open source, how to use how to create an LWC OSS application, which is a standard way which has been prescribed by Salesforce, how to deploy those applications to online, for example, to Heroku, how to make those apps running and all those things. So we will cover those topics as well in this training session. So what are the features of ECMAScript which has to be used in LWC? First is ECMAScript classes. So classes are the new functions of JavaScript under ECMAScript. Then we have the concept of modules. Then modules are basically, they can be imported from one LWC file to another. So that is a very important feature. So we can export and import our modules. We can use one functionality in any other function, in any other LWC component. I mean to say is that if you have developed any functionality in one LWC component, then you can use those functionality in other by importing those functionalities. So that can be done. We are using promises here. So promise is a very important aspect, as we know that LWC is, or say, sorry, JavaScript is a single threaded language. So however, if we want to have asynchronous calls, and we want to have asynchronous operations in our JavaScript code, then we can use promises in that case. So LWC supports promises. Not only promises, it supports other asynchronous programming aspects also. For example, callback functions. Then we also have async and await functionality, which is just an advanced version of the promises. So that can also be used here. Then we have decorators. Decorators are in short term of functions only, with the help of which we can do multiple operations with Salesforce as well as on LWC components. So as of now, we are using many decorators, for example, wire, API, track. So we will get into details about these. So in short, what we can say about is that track variable is used in order to make any property reactive. So when we say reactive, that means that if any change is made on the JavaScript file, it will automatically flow to the HTML file. So track is used for that purpose. However, track, if we define any variable or an attribute with @track, then what happens is that the property becomes private only, and it cannot be accessed from the other Lightning Web components. Therefore, if we want the property to be public, at that case we use @API. And the third one, so @API has a functionality which is similar to @track. However, if we want to access Salesforce data, in that case, we use @wire decorator. So we will discuss about all these things in details. We'll go through each one of them. We'll have demo on each one of them. We'll understand one by one everything. Okay. Then we can use custom elements here. Then shadow DOM is being used here. So we'll understand deeply about shadow DOM as well in the coming sessions. So this slide talks about the web stack transformation which has happened from 2014 to current scenario. So as we know, in 2014, Lightning Aura components was introduced, where we had data services, UI components, component model, templates, rendering optimization modules, and all those things. And at that time, ECMAScript 5 was being used. However, now in the 2019 web stack, we have a specialized services, data services, and ECMAScript 7 came into place. Now, with the advent of Lightning or ECMAScript 6 and 7, we are in the Lightning web components where we have Lightning data services, we have base Lightning components. So we will deep dive into understanding all these aspects. So what are the benefits with LWC? First is that it is more standard. It has more standard. Second is it has a common component model. Third is it's transferable skill. So that means is that you don't need to learn a very specific framework here. If you have a good understanding of JavaScript, you can work on Lightning Web Components. So while we will be having our course, we will focus a lot on the modern JavaScript, because modern JavaScript is basically used in Lightning Web Components. We will deep dive to understand this keyword, arrow functions, promises, async await functionality, fetch API, and classes, import and export functionality of the modules. All these things which are very basic part of the modern JavaScript, and modern JavaScript is heavily used in Lightning Web Components. Fourth is it's easier to ramp up for developers, as I told earlier, because of the fact that it can be used by it can be, you don't need to understand a different framework. You just need to understand JavaScript standard. So since finding developers knowing JavaScript is easier, so that's a benefit associated with LWC. And the fifth one is better performance, because of the fact that the modern browsers can understand LW's JavaScript, and no further interpretation is required. That's why the latency is decreased and the speed increases in case of LWC. So the loading time reduces in case of LWC components. The processing speed is fast. Then we'll talk about Lightning Web Component anatomy, where we'll talk about, so when we talk about LWC components, there are basically three files of it. First is the HTML, second is the JavaScript, and the third one is CSS. So that's what we will discuss about. HTML part contains the template elements, and in the JS file we can write JavaScript code. So in case of Aura components, we also had a concept of helper class, but we don't have any concept like that in LWC. We have a simple JavaScript file, then the CSS file, and then there is one more file, that is XML file, which contains the metadata details about the metadata of the Lightning Web Component. So for example, in which Lightning pages those Lightning Web Components can be used. For example, on the Lightning record page, on Lightning uh, application, or in Lightning community, wherever we want to have this, we can define it in the meta file of, or the XML file of Lightning Web Component. So this slide talks about the templates and slots. Templates allow us to load HTML tags without rendering them on initial load. So we can write once and we can use it in multiple pages. They can be attached to Shadow DOM. And so we'll discuss about all these things in details. This is a template demo where you can see that we have defined a template where document.getElement by ID, where my slider is the template, and then we can append with the template content. So all these things we will have a deep dive to understand about. Custom elements are also another feature of LWC. So we'll discuss all these things. We'll discuss about Shadow DOM, which allows the browser to render DOM elements without putting them into main document DOM tree. So these are something which requires deep dive, and so we'll have dedicated sessions to understand about Shadow DOM. So this slide talks about the modules for data services, UI API, and reactive properties which can be used in LWC. So as I told, that Lightning data service is available in Lightning Web Components, with the help of which we don't need to make a call to Salesforce servers. However, what happens is that Lightning data service provides functionality with which we can communicate to the Salesforce server without writing any Apex code. So it's a form of an API which has been given by Salesforce, and we can just leverage them in order to communicate or to data transfer from one Lightning Web Component from LWC to Salesforce. So suppose if we want to render any data, or if we want to update any record or edit a record or create a record, in that case we can use Lightning data services. UI API. So what the base components, whatever we will be using in LWC, they use the UI API and Lightning data service, with the help of which we can do all the DML operations with Salesforce without writing any Apex code. So these are basic aspects of the Lightning Web Components. We will definitely understand the difference between the Aura components and the Lightning Web Components, how they are different in the subsequent classes. So what is the tooling support for LWC? So it's the Salesforce VS Code extension pack, which has been given by developed by Salesforce engineers. So it is an extension pack which can be downloaded and installed in our Visual Studio Code, with the help of which we can create Lightning Web Components. We can deploy them to our orgs. We can create a scratch orgs. Even we can do all these stuffs on our local server as well. So those, without having the use of Salesforce server, even we can run our code on the local server on all also. So those things are provided, those functionalities are provided by VS Code. So we will understand about this functionality of the tooling support. We will deep dive into it to understand how SFDX has to be installed in our computer, then how to create the Lightning Web Components, how to deploy those Lightning Web Components to our our environment, or to ScratchOx. All those things we'll understand about them. So this slide basically shows how LWC is different with Aura components. So in Aura components, we use attributes and we define the name and the property and all those things. Whereas in case of Lightning Web Components, we can define them with the help of a track or at API and the name of the property. So as I told, there is a difference between track and API. Track is something which makes our property reactive, but at the same time it just makes our property private only. Whereas if we want to make our property to be public, at that case we can use @API. Now in order to refer any variable in Lightning Aura component, we use this exclamation v dot attribute name. That is what we use, so that we can get the value of that particular variable in the Aura component. Whereas in case of Lightning Web Component, we don't need any explanation mark or v dot symbol. Just in curly braces, if we write the name of the variable, then we can use it. Okay. Then we don't need to use handlers and register here. We just need to use a custom event, and then we can dispatch that. So in case of Lightning Aura components, we used to have component event and application event, which was very tedious because we used to create a set of different events, that is an application event and a component event, and then we used to use it in our Aura component files. However, that is not the case with Lightning Web Components. We don't need to create any extra set of events, that is Aura components or application event. Just we can which can dispatch the data with the help of custom events. So any type of communication, whether it be parent to child or child to parent, all those things can be done in Lightning Web Components very easily. We don't need to define any extra set of event files, which we used to do in Lightning Aura component. So we will discuss about it. How do we do the data transfer from parent to child and child to parent, and all those things. So and they can be helped can be done by the use of custom events. So we'll deep dive into it with the help of demo examples and understand about how to do all those things. So this is a very important feature of Lightning Web Component. Then there is a difference in the SLDS, how it has to be used. So we will discuss about all those things as well. Now, this slide is talking about the things which we discussed earlier, use of @API and @track. However, while we will be continuing our course, we will be focusing a lot on JavaScript, because as told that it uses a standard JavaScript and ECMAScript 6 features. So there is a heavy use of JavaScript. So we will deep dive to understand about all the aspects of JavaScript. So what this course component comprises the usage of Lightning Data Service, how to use Apex and Wire Service, then how to use Lightning Web Components in App Builder or Lightning Experience or in mobile. Then we will understand about how to debug JavaScript and HTML in LWC. So debugging in JavaScript is a very important feature, because of the fact is that while people who are working in Salesforce, they would be knowing that debugging code in Apex is quite tedious, because of the fact that you need to go to the debug logs, create new logs, and then see the logs of the users. Whereas in case of JavaScript is not that difficult. The logging, or we can do log of the JavaScript code quite easily with the help of breakpoints. So that is something which we can do with the help of debugging in JavaScript. So we will deep dive into it and understand how the debugging can be done. Then lifecycle hooks, it's a very important feature in Lightning Web Components. So lifecycle hooks are the various callback methods which are fired while the loading of the Lightning Web Component takes place. So they are of various types. For example, the constructor, the connected callback, the disconnected callback, rendered callback function, then error callback function. So these are basically the types of lifecycle hooks which are associated with Lightning Web Components. We'll deep dive into each one of them and understand how to use all of them. So that is something we will discuss in this particular meeting. Okay. Now we'll also understand about component composition, interoperability, and coexistence with Aura, how we can use Lightning Web Components with Aura. So in that case, we have a new concept from Salesforce, that is Lightning Message Service. So we will deep dive to understand how Lightning Message Service can be used. With what we can do is that we can create a metadata file for the Lightning Message Service, and that can be used for communicating our data from one Lightning Web Component to Aura component, not only between LWC and Aura, but we can also use Visualforce pages for this interoperability and coexistence. that is for data transfer between all the three systems, that is Visual Force Pages, Lightning Web Components, and Aura Components. We can use the Lightning Message Service. So we will discuss in detail about Lightning Message Service. There is one more concept of the platform events with the help of which we can transfer the data. So we will also understand about it. However, what Salesforce recommends is to use Lightning Message Service so that Aura components and Lightning Web components can coexist and we can use them with together. Then, as I told that we can use other JavaScript files as well in our Lightning Aura components as well as Lightning Web components. So as we know that since Lightning Locker service is being used, so we will discuss about Lightning Locker service as well. It is a security feature provided from Salesforce, with the help of which what happens is that security is enforced in our Aura components or Lightning Web components. We'll discuss about them in details in the subsequent classes. So what happens is that we cannot make any call to any CDN or content delivery network to get the JavaScript content from them because of the security enforced by the Lightning data service, a Lightning Locker service, sorry. So what happens is that since we cannot use um, external calls or CDN libraries, so that's why what we need to do is that we need to download those files. For example, if we want to use jQuery, then what we need to do is that we need to download that JavaScript file library and then put it into our static resource, and then we can use that JavaScript library with the help of a static resource in our Lightning Aura components or Lightning Web components. So we will discuss about that as well, how to use them and how to use the external API. So we will understand about XHR request as well as fetch API, which are very basic and common while working with Lightning Web components. So Lightning Data Service, as we know that LWC supports UI API. So with the help of that, Lightning Data Service can be used. And we will also discuss about @wire attribute, how it can be used to receive the change and then uh, and make our proper and retrieve the data from Salesforce environment. So that is something we'll discuss in details. As I told that we will also discuss about the lifecycle hooks. So some of the lifecycle hooks are the connected callback, disconnected callback, render callback, or error callback. So what is connected callback? It is called when the element is inserted into the DOM, into the document. So at that time, connected callback is being called. Then when the element is removed from a document, at that time, disconnected callback is called. Then we have render callback. That is, it is called after every render of the component. So for example, we are having three components in the same page. So suppose we have the parent, then child, and then grandchild. So what will happen in each of the file, render will be called every time. So render callback for each of the file will be called. So that is something we will understand with the help of demo. Then we have error callback, which is called when a descendant component throws an error. So if any of the component is not working properly and it throws an error, in that case this particular callback function is being called, which accepts two parameters, error and stack, from the JavaScript file. So these are the lifecycle hooks we will understand in details with the help of demo and examples. So this particular slide talks about the lifecycle component creation with composition. What are the steps that happens? So for example, the constructor is called on the parent. So that is the first step. Then parent is inserted into the DOM. Then connected callback is called on the parent, and then the parent is rendered. then constructor is called on the child, then public property is being updated, then child is inserted into the DOM, then connected callback happens on the child, then the child is rendered, then rendered callback is called on the child, and then rendered callback is called on the parent. So you can see that there are many of the lifecycle hooks which has been involved here. So what are the lifecycle hooks which has been involved? First is the constructor, which is called on the parent. So this particular slide talks about the component creation in case of parent-child relationship. So suppose we are having a file such that we have a parent component and under that there is a child component. So now how the execution will happen, that is something that slides talks about. That is about the constructor, then it talks about the connected callback, and then again it talks about the rendered callback. So these are the three lifecycle hooks which have been discussed in the flow diagram. So first is that the constructor on the parent is called, not on the child. Then the parent is inserted into the DOM. Then connected callback on parent happens, then the parent is rendered, then constructor is called on child. So these are this is a basic flow, and we can deep dive into it by the help of demo examples in subsequent classes, because we will allocate uh, sessions for each one of them, and we will deep dive into it with the help of demos to get a clear idea about all these aspects. So this is also how the life cycle when the component is removed. So what happens is that first the parent is removed from DOM, then disconnected callback happens on parent, and then child is removed from DOM, and then disconnected callback happens. So this is the life cycle how the component is removed. We will also discuss as of now I'm just giving brief idea on these, but we will discuss on these in details, because this is a demo class. So just I'm giving a brief idea about all the concepts which we are going to cover. So there is one more mechanism, as I discussed, that lightning message service is used in order to transfer the data between our three different systems. For example, the lightning web components, the lightning aura components, and the Visualforce pages. So if we want to communicate our data from between these three different systems, in that case we use our lightning message service, which is a standard prescription from Salesforce in order to communicate or transfer data between three components and to have them so that they can be used with in the same page or on the same lightning page. So in that case, we use lightning message service. However, if we want to transfer the data between two lightning web components only, in that case, Salesforce suggests us to use the pub sub model, and that is what this slide talks about, where we will have a publisher and the other will be a subscriber. So in that case, we need to create another JavaScript file, that is pub sub file, with the help of which the communication component to component communication can happen. So that is something we will understand in the pub sub class too. There will be dedicated session on this pub sub session as well, to understand how does the pub sub model works in LWC, how do we transfer data between one lightning web component to another lightning web component. So what is a PubSub module? It is a singleton library that follows publish subscription pattern, and the lightning web component sample repositories include a PubSub module which can be used in your code. So what it means is that if you will notice the lightning web component sample repository, then you'll find a PubSub module which can be used in our code by as I told that since LWC provides the functionality of import and export, so we can import the files to our lightning web component. So PubSub file so PubSub module is also you can understand it as a JavaScript file which we can import in our our Lightning Web Components from where we can transfer the data. So that is something which we will discuss in details about the PubSub module. As I told that we can import the JavaScript files and then we can use it. So that file, that is the PubSub file, it is available in the sample repositories of the Lightning Web Components, which we can use in our modules. That is what this particular slide talks about. Then each component that subscribes to the event also can receive the event. And Aura components consume the PubSub module via Lightning Web Component wrapper called Aura PubSub. So these are the concepts which we will discuss in details with respect to PubSub module. So this slide talks about the LWC and Aura components composition strategy, where we have an Aura component. Under it, we have Aura component and Lightning Web component. And then the other one is we have a Lightning Web component under which we have two Lightning Web components. So these are the feasible composition strategies. So we will discuss about these as well. So more or less, I have covered some of the aspects associated to the LWC sessions which we will have. We'll discuss, as I told, that LWC is basically using standard JavaScript. So we will discuss in deep with respect to JavaScript as well, with respect to the usage of modern JavaScript. For example, the usage of this keyword. This keyword is very important. Then arrow functions, then string literals. So we will have a demo on all these aspects, because covering all these things in a single session won't be possible. So as of now, I'm just giving a brief understanding of what we will be covering in the subsequent classes. We'll understand about XHR request and fetch API. Fetch API is used for making calls to external system with the help of LWC JavaScript files. So that is something we will deep dive into it. We'll understand about asynchronous programming in JavaScript, where we'll cover all the three aspects, that is the callback functions, then promises, and then we'll also understand about the async and await functionality of JavaScript. So then there are other aspects also. For example, import and export of files. So if you have created a JavaScript file anywhere, then you can import that functionality in a Lightning Web Component. So we will understand about that import and export functionality. So then the classes, the concept of classes in JavaScript. So classes are simply a different type of function in JavaScript. So we'll deep dive to it, understand about it. We'll understand about the spread operators, how it is being used in the modern JavaScript. Then, so these are the basic aspects of the JavaScript, which is very essential in order to work on LWC. So we will discuss about it. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much in the demo session of LWC. I would like to know if anyone has any question on this.
Hi, Siddharth.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, so I would like to know, is it possible that if we get a lesson plan, like in lesson 1 or lesson 2, what you're gonna cover? This is the whole idea. I can understand that you're covering all the LWC, but we have Apex, we have JavaScript. So I would like to know how you're gonna cover, like in class lesson 1, what all things you're going to cover, lesson 2. So is it possible to share those details?
Yeah, so here only we have already in this file, if you'll go, then we can 1 minute, let me share this thing with you all.
That would be great
So
if we
here,
get this course content.
yeah, so we have already shared that in the list, and you can go through it to understand what are the topics. So these are the topics we'll understand about in about LWC, where so you can just go to this URL and we will discuss about you can see what are the course content there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it for now from my end.
Okay.
And thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, no problem. So any other question? So Kishore, are you there in the call?
No, Siddharth, no.
Okay, so that's much. That's pretty much in the demo session. We can have further sessions to deep dive into the concepts.
All right then. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye.